The reality is that the current examples of AI applied in education do not promote excellence, and they aim to promote efficiency. But I think there is potential for new tools to be developed over time. The ways in which the tools currently work is they're all about focusing on skills and mathematics and basic functionalities, and it uses ways to engage the student with questions and answers, and it's very instructionist. It undermines student agency. What we need are tools that expand the students, that help them grow, and at the moment I don't think the tools do that. So I think it is possible for AI to be used to support excellence in education and training. But I think we need a lot more work, and we need the AI engineers to shift their focus of attention. And I think to achieve that, it means that people like us, people who are involved in education and training, need to engage, need to push them, need to say, well, what you're doing now is okay, but it's not good enough. How can we make it better?
You mentioned students, but also teachers and trainers. How can we make the voices of all of these actors be heard in the discussion about the role of AI? And what kind of intervention is needed in the corporate world that drives evolution in the sector?
That's hugely difficult. I think what's important are engaging teachers and trainers, particularly in conversations, expanding the conversation as best we can, but it's also the teachers and trainers themselves. They need to grab hold of the opportunity and say, AI is happening, but how do I, as an educator, take advantage of that AI? How do I help move it in the right direction? I think, that kind of conversation is quite difficult, because the kind of tools I mentioned that are used in AI for foundational skills are now run by multi-million-dollar companies around the world. I could name 60 of them, multi-million dollars. And they are very good at marketing what they're doing. And so policymakers tend to listen to them. But we need to break that down a bit. So I'm not saying that any of those companies are doing bad things. What I'm saying is they're doing easy things, the low-hanging fruit. And what we need to say is, well, that's fine, but actually it'd be far more interesting if we did these other things. So teachers have got to take a critical attitude to the AI tools that are being brought into their classroom. Not just use it because it seems fun or exciting, but does it really and genuinely support the kind of teaching that you think is important? If it does, great, use it. If it doesn't, speak to your principal, speak to other teachers. We need to keep that conversation going. And I think we need to ensure that we speak with the ministries of education. For ministers, it sounds like a quick win. We can bring the AI in and it sorts everything, and that just isn't true. So teachers need to be involved in that conversation.
Cedefop is planning a survey of vet teachers and trainers. And this survey, you think it might contribute to the issue of excellence in AI? And in what way?
It certainly has the potential to do that. And it depends on the questions that the survey raises. But I think if we look at the kind of hopes and expectations of teachers, then we can do that. But I think once the survey is complete, a next step is what professional development do we need to make available to teachers? So yes, we need their thoughts, their hopes, their aspirations. What are they fearful of in AI? What are they excited about in AI? What do they know about AI at the moment? And ways in which it will impact on teaching and training. Once we've got a clear picture of that, and at the moment we don't, once we've got a clear picture, then it's about determining, well, what professional development do ministries, other organizations need to develop to help teachers and trainers really understand what these tools do, what they can do, what they can't do, what they're good for, and what maybe they shouldn't be touching at all. What are the problems that they introduce? So I think the survey is a really good opportunity to understand exactly how teachers are feeling with respect to these new technologies coming into classrooms and training rooms. But for me, that's step one. We also need the step two.
You mentioned earlier companies aiming at the low-hanging fruit. One section of learners who I don't think qualify as low-hanging fruit is those at risk of leaving education and training. In that particular situation, how could AI provide support?
Well, I think if we're talking about foundational skills, basic mathematics, for example, we know the evidence is that if you have difficulties with mathematics, that can impact on your lifelong. So it is important, particularly through IVET, to give students the skills that they need so they can engage in society more productively. And it is true that some of the tools that exist might be supportive of that. I think it's when the tools are used in a classroom and you've got 30 students all using individual computers that it's not quite so good. But for students who are working independently or working at home or doing work to support the work they're doing in a classroom, then many of those tools can be useful.
Now moving away from the world of education and training into the world of employment and the labor market. There is a lot of talk about AI replacing people, taking away jobs. Cedefop has been looking into this issue for some years now as well. What kind of jobs are under threat in your opinion, and how can this be mitigated?
I think the reality is that nobody really knows what the impact will be. As you say, Cedefop have done lots of work. Researchers and big consultancies around the world have published documents about this problem again and again. I think we can't say now whether the impact will be overly negative or overly positive, but what we can say is there is an impact, and that impact is becoming more obvious. So there's a lot of talk about what's referred to as the hollowing out of the middle, making a hole in the middle. So in other words, people at the top of professions, probably their jobs are safe. People at the bottom of professions where they're involved in doing hands-on things, like maybe a mechanic, or maybe someone in retail, or somebody in hospitality, those kind of roles are likely to remain. But it's the group in the middle where their roles are being increasingly challenged. So to give you one example, in law. Now, in law, traditionally, when you join a law firm, you start at the bottom, you work your way up by doing certain tasks. But now there are AI tools that are very good at doing those tasks, which suggests that actually it's going to be quite difficult for lawyers to move up because the middle part of their training, if you like, goes. Other work in things like accountancy, where the AI is working in particularly sophisticated ways and doing a lot of the work that accountants have traditionally done. So it's, as I say, it's this middle group where in the first instance, there seems to be a lot of pressure. With regards to teachers and trainers themselves, I think it's unlikely there's going to be an impact. However, I do think we have to pay attention and keep aware. I talked about the tools, the 60 companies and foundational work, etc. Now, these companies always suggest that their tools are there to support the teacher. But the reality is that those tools take on board some of the role of the teacher. And we hear about the tools perhaps saving teacher time. And it's things like that I think are a bit of a red herring. I don't think they're necessarily true. What these tools do is they do a bit of the teaching, which the teacher would generally do, or they do a bit of the assessment that the teacher would do. The idea that AI can do that better than the teacher is just not true. But if it's misunderstood and it's seen as, well, we can save teacher time, it's only another step to say, well, we can save teachers. So actually, in the world of education and training, there is that possibility if teachers and trainers don't get involved in the conversation. In the broader world, I think, as I say, it's too early to know. Definitely things are being automated. And one of the arguments is that it's not whole jobs that are being automated, but it's actually particular tasks within a job.
You have, in a sense, answered my last question, which was about how you see AI impacting learning and the labor market in 10 years' time. But let me rephrase that a little bit and ask you whether you can see AI becoming robust enough so that it can deliver what we would like it to deliver in terms of excellence, and also not being a threat to both human beings and to their development.
At the moment, I can't see AI achieving that. I think there are many ways in which the tools can be useful to complement, to augment, to add to what the human teachers and trainers do. And so they might be small parts of the trainees' training where they can use a bit of AI here or a bit of AI there, and that will be beneficial. But it certainly on its own cannot supplant what we can achieve now. And particularly if it's used to reduce the number of teachers, then I think that will be a very, very bad thing. So I think that over the next 10 years, we are going to find increasing numbers of applications of AI. But to be honest, the current way AI works, it's all about finding patterns. You give it lots of data, it finds patterns, and then we can use those patterns to determine what to do next. But the problem is that those patterns, it's not much more than that. And we kind of have built up this myth of how clever AI is. And the reality is that AI doesn't work without people. So I think this speaks to part of your question with the impact on labor. I think the reality is that to develop an AI tool takes an enormous amount of human labor, and running the AI tool does as well. So, for example, humans have to decide what the data is. They have to collect the data. They have to clean the data. They have to put it into the AI. They have to choose the model. They have to evaluate which model is the most successful. They have to make decisions. They have to put it into a value decision. So all of that involves people. So I suspect there will be lots of people who will get new jobs that make sure that these tools are doing what they should be doing, not what they just are doing at the moment.